Hello and welcome to this episode of Minnesota Drummer. I'm your host, Paul the Rod Rogne, and on this episode, we have none other than Dave Hanzel. And if you're not familiar with Dave, I put together a little piece that hopefully will get you some information on who he is and what he's about.
Dave Hanzel. He's a drumsmith who went on to start his own drum company called Boom Alley Drums. Dave still offers drumcraft services such as bearing edges, shell reconstruction, shell covering, repair, and more. In 1978, Dave took lessons from Gary Gauger. Gary is best known for his Purecussion RIMS suspension mounts. Today, Gary's product is morphed into Gary Gauger Incorporated, offering a wide array of products including the updated alloy rims. In the summer of 1978, Gary recommended Dave audition for the McDonalds All-Star Band, but it was in 1983 when he got his first jobbing date for the great trumpet player Steve Wright. Dave then started being recommended for a lot of various work in the metro area. In February of '85, he got called to play a rehearsal date for the infamous house band Ruperts Orchestra, but unbeknownst to him, it was an audition, and he stayed with them until 1993. Since then, Dave has backed Smokey Robinson, Donny Osmond, St. Paul Peterson, Chucky, Celine Dion, Eddie Money, and Huey Lewis, to name a few. He taught as an assistant percussion teacher at McNally Smith College of Music for 15 years and still takes private students. Currently, Dave is in the house band of St. Joan of Arc's Church in Minneapolis, and in September, Dave recorded drum tracks for a fundraiser for cancer patients called the Hospice Gala, based in Rochester. To become in demand was always at the forefront of his mind. His ambitions were to work with the best players he could. Developing products for his drum company, Boom Alley Drums, and working for some of the best players in town, he feels has really been rewarding for him over the last 35 years.
Dave, welcome. How are you doing?
Hey, Paul, thanks for having me, man. That's great.
It's awesome. Apology to the viewers right now that we had a little bit of a little issue getting started, but we're here. We're going to have a great time tonight. Dave and I have not talked in 25 years.
Yes. Where does the time go?
I don't know, man. To give you a little bit of personal history, viewers, about Dave and myself, I worked at RIMS Percussion. I got a job there. I met Dave from you coming in, I think, and talking with Gary. And at that point, that's where I got to know Gary Gauger, obviously. And also Walt Johnston, who was a former CEO of Pearl, I believe, who then took over for RIMS Percussion.
Yep.
And it was a very interesting time in my life. And at that time, I was really into custom drum manufacturing, or getting into it. And you were a drumsmith at that time. And you taught me so much about the craft of drum building that I've carried forward all these years, and you're just a master at it. You were then, and you still are.
Well, I think I was pretty much probably getting into it around that time, because I remember I think it was probably about the time that I got the gig over at Ruperts, and I had just bought a Gretsch set, a new Gretsch set from like the 80s. They were horrible. They would not open up. I couldn't get anything out of them, and I just was frustrated. And I remember telling Gary about this, and it was just like, I've got lines to different wholesalers. If you wanted to, you could try building your own drums. Because I know everybody in the business really. So I did. I just undertook it. I grew up, my family was in the furniture restoration business. So I was around machines all my life, growing up. And so it was kind of a no-brainer. So I undertook it. And I don't know, I came up, over the years, I've changed my stuff. I've improved the components that I use on my drums. But I knew the sound that I had in my head was not coming out of those Gretsch drums, and I was determined. I guess I was determined.
Well, you were, because your knowledge of drum building was so inspirational to me. You talked about early on. You talked about tonally matching the drums, which DW patented years later. Yeah, and then also matching the external ply of the shell to make sure you have a complete set. Yep. And you also talked to me about the note of a drum. You taught me about the whole idea about, which was interesting. When you look at studio pictures of drummers in the 70s and 80s, you'd see that a lot of times they have like a popcorn set or a jelly bean set is what they would refer to it.
Yep.
Different drums, different series. And it was specifically so they could each have their own note. Can you talk a little bit about the notes of drums in studios and how the history of that?
Well, and I think even more so, I think drummers need not get so hung up on the note of the shell, because there are so many factors that go into the drum sound. I mean, it really needs to be like square with itself to vibrate properly. The thickness of the shell, what you put in the shell. The bearing edges have to be really straight, because when you put the drum heads on, drum heads are made with like great machinery. I mean, everything is perfect. So anything that is imperfect on the drum shell is going to definitely create problems with the drum head vibrating on the shell. So, I mean, there are all these different components that are adding to what you're hearing when you tighten the heads up. And, that all goes into suspending the drum or how you're mounting the drum. And it just, I have never been one to get so hooked on like a note of a shell. I mean, I'm very aware that it happens, it's there. And I do tap the shells. Mostly I tap them just to compare like the pitches of thicknesses of shells with the same diameter, or with covered shells versus, uncovered shells. Because covered shells are always dead. They're just dead because the covering kills it. And it's a soft material and it absorbs vibration. So I've always been kind of a proponent of natural drum shells, but I think that's kind of what you're looking for. I'm not sure.
Oh, completely. I mean, I was just kind of listening. It was kind of like a flashback. No, it was talking about the mastery of drum craftsmanship, and I think you're using 6-ply shells, if I remember right, and you're using a 3/8 round over to a 45.
Yep. Yeah, it's basically just like a quarter round.
Okay.
And then I do I think I've always just did a kind of a slight back cut, just to make sure the head doesn't buzz on the bearing edge. Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the importance of a bearing edge on a drum?
I think,
and about the buzz and stuff.
And I think, the bearing edges on a drum are going to change the way the sound of the drum is going to be. Ultimately, with any head you put on the drum, it's going to affect the vibration. It's going to affect the feel of the drum. More resistance if you have more of a broader, like if you have like a 1/4 inch shell with a quarter rounded bearing edge, is going to feel somewhat resistant, because that's a lot of shell, a 1/4 inch shell. A lot of guys are going to think I'm crazy. It's like, that's not thick at all, man. But there's a big difference between a 1/4 inch and 3/16, and just the way the drums vibrate. That's why I've always gone with 3/16 inch shells, just because they just breathe so nicely. You can even put a little small reinforcing hoop in them, and they'll still be somewhat reactive. You don't have to play them hard. And when I build my drums, I make sure that things work as an instrument should. And, so it should have like a real dynamic feel, all the way from low volume to like when you're really just laying into it. And it should react that way. And you start like doing that with like 1/4 inch, 5/16, thicker shells, where you just have to really play the drums really hard to get anything out of them. And then at some point, it's like you're defeating the purpose of a drum, of the size of the drum. If you have to overplay it, there's only so much you can get out of a certain size drum. So Again, I hope that answers your question.
Well, yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask another question then. You talk about reinforcement rings. So what's the value of a reinforcement ring in a drum?
Well, I think they're really important if you're going to like pretty thin shells. Like, I mean, even thinner than like 3/16 inch shells.
Okay.
I think they tend to give you more resistance in the shell, more, it's just like it holds the drum more in a stable fashion. I think as you, let's say, I've worked on like thousands of drums. A lot of old Ludwig drums from like the mid 60s. Everybody says that era is just a wonderful era. It's, from what I've found, it's a terrible era of drums.
Okay.
Because Ludwig was making zillions of shells at that time and hiring anybody off the street and filling their warehouse with any kind of shells. So they had people doing work that they shouldn't have been working on shells, because some of the stuff I've seen is just so out of square. The bearing edges are just trash. So a lot of guys that bring me these drums, they don't understand why they're not working. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason is the reinforcing hoops on those drums are really huge. They're really thick. And it makes the drums, I know a lot of guys are going to think I'm nuts, but they make the drums feel really like resistant. They don't open up. They're good for like a small range of tuning, but beyond that, they're really limited in I don't know what you can get out of them.
Okay.
That's why I think, guys, drummers like Jeff Porcaro, guys who used Gretsch drums from like the late 60s, mid 60s. Those are great drums. They're thin shells and they have a broad bearing edge. The shell is not too thick, and the drum head can still vibrate on that shell, and you get just this really beautiful tone out of the drums. So, I mean, I'm just using my ears from years of working on like Yamaha drums, Pearl drums, Mapex drums, Ludwig drums from all the different eras. And I just found drums that don't have reinforcing hoops are just a better instrument. They're just a better instrument. Yeah. That's my feeling.
Right. No, and that's totally your opinion. That's totally understandable. Now, can you speak a little bit to the whole concept of Jasper Shells, who supplied Gretsch with the drums early on? Their magical sauce essentially was like a gumwood that they would put in the shell, which gives it that classic sound. Right. Have you found that to be true?
Yeah, I mean, those are good shells. I mean, as long as they didn't make them, like Gretsch was using gum, and I've read articles about why they used gum, because if they tried to use other, I think the glues at the time, I mean, the plies wouldn't stick together.
Well, also it was a cost thing, because they were originally a furniture company, and gumwood was very cheap, and they started putting them into shells, and it worked.
Totally.
And so I think that's why it worked. But it just turns out that it was kind of an amazing thing.
And I think, by putting like maple on the outside of the shells or something a little more dense, created that integrity on the shells. And I mean, it's a great combination, so I mean, it speaks for itself.
What would be your favorite kind of shell construction today?
You know what? I've really been kind of liking ash. Okay. And maple has always been really good. I just got done doing some recording downstairs for a couple of big things that I got involved in. And man, I haven't recorded my drums in a couple of years. And I just couldn't freaking believe it. I mean, they were just like, I didn't even work on them. I just like put the mics over the drums and just played, and it was like they were just so round and ballsy. You know,
Really?
it's just really cool. I didn't even have to hardly EQ them, which says a lot for the drum. You know, if you can run them flat. I remember years ago after I started getting into the business and building drums, and you know, probably talking to you, and I mean, sound guys would come up to me. And it's like, why do your drums? Oh, they just like, I don't even have to do anything to them. I'm running them flat. It's like, what do you do? And it's like, well, it's just using, you know, what I just described. And, you know, I'm using Gary Gauger's rims. You know, I just got hip to all that stuff. And I tested all his stuff, man, everything, all his headset stuff, all the rims. I was the one that came up. I know Gary's going to probably kill me, but I came up. I know I went to his house one day and told him that by having less flanges on the rims, it opens up the drums. And he was like, he kind of looked at me. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, so a lot of the steel rims, when I was working on guys' drums for like, I don't know, 15 years ago, I'd cut off the flanges on those rims because you didn't need the flanges. And that was my own thing, but you know,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, less touching of, you know, touching the drum and less vibration transfer, and I don't know, it made a huge difference. So
you also were using a hex lugs. I think you're having them. They were cut out of hex stock. They were low profile.
I was. Wow. I may have, you know, I may have had Gordy Knutsen's brother build me some lugs, or machine me some lugs out of, I think they may have been stainless steel. Beautiful lugs, just gorgeous. And they work great. I think that may have been what you're referring to.
Yeah, because it was a kit you had in your apartment, or not apartment, you're living in a house in Minneapolis, I think, upper level. You know, dude, it's been so long, but it was either a wine red or a brown set.
Oh, right. Yep. I remember that. Yep.
Yeah, and it was the lugs on that. They were just they really stood out to me.
Yeah.
But it was the whole idea of low profile. That shortly after that is when Yamaha released their low profile brass lug.
Yeah.
The name's escaping to me right now, but that's the whole science behind what they were producing. Was kind of interesting because they kind of followed what you had always.
I highly doubt Yamaha followed what I was doing, but
yeah, I know.
But you know, I think the reason I started or made a great change to what I was doing is because I had been doing pretty much doing the same thing everybody else was doing up until like 9/11.
Okay.
And all my business went away. It just all went away.
Really?
It just like, I don't know. I had like 6 months of no work. It was like, what happened? And then, so I think about halfway through this, I started thinking, well, I could continue down this road of doing the same thing, of using like knockoff lugs and all this stuff, and all these wholesalers that sell all this stuff. And, you know, they're selling the same stuff and everybody's using the same stuff. Or I can do a 180 and just like redefine what I was doing. And so that's what I did. I went out and I found a guy up in Plymouth to build me a mold and create my, I just happen to have a couple of things. My,
awesome.
My lug, which is somewhere here. So this is a composite lug. It weighs like less than a quarter, and I mean it's just a tension barrel, aluminum tension barrel with a pin in it, and it's super light. So my drums are like 50% lighter than most drums, and I think by keeping in balance the weight of what you're putting on the shell and the shell itself, and then the external influences of the hoops, like, can also change it. But just for myself, I was trying to, do my own thing. So I started with the lug and got rid of all the weight on the shell. So it was drastic. I mean, I can pick up my shells with 2 fingers. They're so light.
Really?
I mean, they're super light. And I kind of got that idea from really fine made guitars. I mean, great guitars don't weigh anything. I mean, they're just like, and they sound so open when you play them. And I mean, it's like, why are drums like designed this way, like with balance and like not more is more, but less is more.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I was coming from. So it was in conjunction with my lug, and then I had my easy nub that I put on my bass drum hoop, which basically connects this thing here. It's basically, if you can see it, and the tension rod fits right in like this. So once the tension rod is in the hoop, for the first time, if you're going to buy a drum from me, you'd never have to take the tension rod out of the lug. You just back it out past the nub, and it slides out. So you just jog the whole hoop one way, and it goes past all of the lugs or the tension rods. And this is something that came up in 2003, and I still have guys like asking me. It's like, hey, how can I get that? That is the coolest idea. And the reason I came up with this idea is because it's a pain in the butt to change a bass drum head.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's like, why do I have to take everything apart, take it off the hoop, put it on the floor, it all falls apart? It's like, it's just ridiculous.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, you just loosen these up, jog the hoop, take off the hoop, everything is aligned, you put it back on. Takes you like 3 minutes to change a bass drum hoop.
Wow.
Bass drum head. Yeah, if you're good at it, and I'm really good at it, maybe 5 minutes.
So how can people get a hold of those, and how much are they?
Well, actually, they're not for sale aftermarket.
Oh, wow.
So
Killing me.
It's a teaser. It's a teaser. But it's one of the things, if you buy Boom Alley drums, that's what the difference is between my company and everybody else. So,
well, do you have a patent on that?
No, I don't have a provisional patent or anything on this. Nobody's ever tried to rip me off because
that's fantastic.
It's a lug. I mean, anybody could come and change this easily, and do something different. And they probably have already. So, I mean, I'm not going to go changing it. And it's like, it's a basic idea. So,
well, I think it's a game changer. And, yeah. But did I hear that you're not making Boom Alley drums right now? Are you taking a break from that for a little bit?
I'm just kind of backing away from it because I'm trying to kind of spend more time developing some accessories.
Okay.
I think, to tell you the truth, the drum market is so saturated right now. And there's, these big companies spend so much money promoting drums that, well, personally, I think it's a lot of money being thrown at products that probably shouldn't be out there. But anyway, and I'm probably saying this, and a lot of people are shaking their heads going, you are nuts, man. But I mean, for a classic example, and people are going to shake their head again, but when Tama came out with this mount that has magnets in it to actually suspend the drum. I mean, it's an admirable idea, but you can tell they weren't drummers that designed it because they designed it in such a way that doesn't fit in a case. It just sticks. It's like, what are you doing? it's got to fit. Drummers aren't going to want to go out and, buy this set of drums. And then they got to buy all brand new cases. It's like, dude, I mean, they have this incredible machinery to make all these great mounts and stuff. And they come up with this stuff that it's like, it's really not functional. So anyway, I mean, they do make, everybody makes good products. It's just something, I mean, they have just like, it seems they have a lot of money to throw at.
You're right. And we also have a huge influx right now of Chinese companies.
Oh, man.
I went to NAMM a few years ago, and I was shocked that I'd probably say a third of the drum suppliers were from China.
Yes.
And, I'm not saying that their craftsmanship isn't the best, but it's like when you looked at them, there's nothing unique about them. There's nothing, that screamed craftsmanship.
No. And I think most drummers have to remember that there's one company mainly that's making all the hardware.
Right.
And I don't think a lot of guys realize that, it's like, well, I'm going to buy Yamaha, I'm going to buy Tama. It's like, there may be a couple of companies that have their own houses, but it's expensive. You can't go out and have tooling for all this stuff. So the companies, they just buy out, a company for like 3 months or something, and they make all their stuff for the year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think guys really need to understand that, when you're picking out gear, it's just like, be aware that, it's probably the same company making all the stuff.
Right.
So.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that the drumming community is smaller than I thought it was,
Yeah.
Everybody knows everybody and everyone knows about how things are being built.
So
have you had an opportunity, though, off topic, to use Nordic shells at all?
You know what? I have used Nordics. Dave West is a great guy to deal with. They make great shells. I just ordered some shells for a guy that I'm in the process of building, like one of my last sets before I kind of take a break. But Dave, he just informed me that they're getting all new like forms to make counter hoops from like 6-inch through 28-inch. It's like, wow. And I don't know how if they do like inserts in different ones to utilize, or if they have presses for each side. I don't know. But
they have a press for, well, I talked to them a little bit about it. They have a press for each side.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that when you have the variability of shell thickness and plies, they've done a lot of formulation to set up the machine so they can say what it is, including the density of the wood, program it in there, and it forms the shell.
Yeah.
I've seen some shells. I have yet to play them, but what I'm so excited about is, I don't know if you remember this, but when I worked at RIMS Percussion, I was custom building drums, not like you, but I was gonna be more of the lower quality probably. No, I was taking shells, but I didn't have the passion for the drum shell. I had the passion for the hardware. I don't know if you remember that, but but what was interesting is I kind of lucked into, well, also, do you remember, I loved large size drums. I don't know if you remember that.
Yep.
Keller made me a pair of 36 long by 28-inch shells. I still have them. You can't fit them on a stage.
Where do you put them?
They're stacked in the garage, dude. I can't get them on a stage.
In the garage, right?
Don't tell them that, though. No,
okay.
For a while, what was interesting is when I first got hooked up with Keller, at that time, you couldn't just buy Keller shells. You had to be a business, in the business.
Sure.
So Walt Johnston was the one who set me for that.
Yep.
But what was funny about Walt is that within a year, I was starting to sell a lot of shells.
Wow.
Not because I wanted to. It wasn't a business. It was just people heard that I was doing this. And they made big drum shells, and they're like, "Wow, how did you do that?"
Yeah.
So I was talking to Walt about, hey, would you think about, partnering somehow or working with me so we can work together? And he actually cut me off. I had to quit RIMS because he said now I was, what would they call it? I was conflict of interest.
Sure.
So he hooked me up, and then they came up with their Purecussion RIMS drum set about a year later.
Wow.
But it was kind of funny. But Keller I was going to be the sole distributor in the world for exotic exterior plies of Keller shells.
Very cool.
And like an idiot, I didn't do it though, because I kind of, from what we had talked about, I calculated the amount of shells I'd need for every size to match the brain and the tones if I really wanted to do it that way. And people are like, oh, just send them a shell. And I'm like, well, I don't want to just send them a shell, because you'd brainwash me by this point, because you explained the musicality of a shell. You ruined me, dude, because I just had an opportunity. But going back to that point is that Keller at that point wouldn't make custom shells, and they had a lot of issues with their shells. So you had to do a lot of work with them at that point. And now with having Nordic Shells in town, and them being able to work with you on creating your own series of shells, let's call it, is I can't, it's just so exciting. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah. They could, he can make anything. I think I've probably 3 or 4 orders now that I've used them. I mean, just like this one guy ordered like 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and a couple of bass drums. I mean, they were all beautiful. They were all round, like dead on. So, I mean, it says a lot for the manufacturing process. And, it's right in my backyard, which is wonderful because, I can develop a relationship with them now. So, yeah, it's cool.
For you viewers, Nordic Shells is our own shell manufacturer, like Keller Shells, in Minnesota.
Yep.
And I'm excited. I'm gonna be having them on the show. We talked about doing interviews, but COVID hit.
Sure.
And it's just been kind of odd ever since. But I can't wait to do it because it's just so exciting. Talking to you about shells and all that kind of stuff that they're in town. So I'm expecting you to come up with your own kind of some of your own kind of balanced shell.
Well, I don't know if I think I'm going to leave that to Dave. He's, those guys, he spent a lot of money and he's got the facility to do it. And, I was thinking about getting into doing shells and selling shells. And I came across the same thing like you, man. It's like, you got to have a space. You got to have some cash to buy all the product. And because when people start calling, it's like, well, I want this and this and this. Like, if you don't have it, it's not good for business. So,
no.
Yeah. So,
well, hey, what I want to do is I want to take a little bit of a musical break. I have a video of yours that I chose, as we talked about. You didn't have a whole lot of stuff, but I chose one that I thought is really interesting and timely for the time of year.
Okay.
I want you to introduce this one. This is the Thriller video. Can you tell people about this Thriller?
No, I don't know. What is it?
Are you kidding me? It's you and an organist doing a duel. You got to understand, Bill Chenard was my best man. Bill Chenard he's a world-class organist, but he also is a world-class bass player. He's like, the guy never practices. He's just super incredible. He has 2 other brothers that are really incredible musicians too. Anyway, so Bill and I met in 1982 when we played with this big band that McDonald's, the restaurant, set up, and we did a bunch of concerts, and we just got to play together and became best friends, and it was a lot of fun. So this thing is in a church, his church that he's been at, I think, for 35 years or some ridiculous number. But he always puts on a Halloween show for all the kids, And so he plays, Thriller and, a bunch of other cartoons, organ things, and, very period appropriate for Halloween. So I can't believe you found this. Hey, it's what I do, man.
It's just like what it is. Another thing.
Dude, I thought it was exciting because when we get out of this, I want to talk a little bit about your how wide you are as a player, your multiple different styles. And this is kind of cool. It's just you and an organist.
Yeah.
Who's just literally, his playing is blowing me away.
Yeah.
And it's just you playing with him. It's just an amazing duet. So.
That's really what I was doing, is just playing with him, It was easy. He makes it easy. So,
well, here's Thriller.
All right.
A unique way, done by the church.
Minnesota Drummer is expanding drumming news. We are proud to announce the addition of Drumming News Network. There have been many requests to feature global drumming information, artists, and product releases on Minnesota Drummer. Minnesota Drummer's vision is to stay focused exclusively on Minnesota drummers and the Minnesota drumming community. Please visit our new website, drummingnewsnetwork.com, and please be sure to like us on Facebook. Thank you so much for your continued interest and support. In the 1980s, Eccentric Systems developed a cam for bass drum pedals, becoming the standard design for many of today's pedals, including the popular GW9000 series of pedals. The Quick Torque Cam is an aftermarket add-on that can be installed on just about any pedal without any permanent modification. Its unique adjustable design maximizes the efficiency of any force you apply to the pedal, returning the beater 30% faster while providing more impact. This is a cost-effective way to breathe new life into your existing pedals. Be eccentric. Visit eccentricsystems.com to get yours today. One of our fellow Minnesota drummers needs our help. Eric Ballard's daughter, Emery, has been diagnosed with leukemia. Emery was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia on August 17th of this year. Emery's current treatment plan consists of her receiving aggressive chemotherapy and then a bone marrow transplant. Eric and his family ask that we follow Mary's progress on their designated Facebook page. A link to the Facebook page will be in the show notes of this episode, and they ask that we keep Mary in our prayers that God will heal their daughter. And this is a point where we can help. Any size donation that we can make will help with monthly expenses and medical bills. I ask you to consider any size donation, even a small amount will help. In these times, I know money's tight. Any size donation is valuable. This is crowdfunding at its best. A link to where you can donate will be on the show notes of this episode. Eric Ballard is a prominent drummer in the Minnesota drumming scene. Please consider donating today.
Welcome back. And again, please consider donating for Eric and his family. It's sad to see his little baby girl going through that right now. So.
Oh man, I can't imagine. I mean, I had a little girl, at one time, just like him, and it's just like it's heartbreaking for sure. So. Mm-hmm. Hey, nice clip.
Dude, here's the problem. You don't send me a video, I'm going to do it. I'm going to find the most embarrassing thing I can find.
Oh, that was a hard gig. I remember doing that, man. That he had me, I had to play with rods in this room because it was just, there was it was designed for organs. So, I couldn't play soft enough. I'm
really?
Sure you've played church gigs, and it's just like those rooms just get away on you. So, it's impossible. You're losing from beat one. Let's just say that.
But dude, that was so cool. It was just fun. And
yeah.
That's a great segue into your versatility as a player.
Oh, thanks.
So can you talk to us a little bit about your methodology and your thought process on what drumming means to you? And what you want to do, what kind of drummer you want to be.
I think I was really lucky to run into Gary Gauger and Gordy Knudsen, and then the people that they knew, because they were all really great influences in the kind of music that I grew up listening to, in the mid 70s, late 70s. That was a great period of music. Mm-hmm. There were actually solos in tunes and stuff, and great drummers. And so to be exposed to that, and then, listening to great jazz later on, Philly Joe and Max and Tony, all those guys, man, just to be aware of that and to learn that from your teachers like I did, mm-hmm. To be aware of not only the stuff that's on, that you're into, but to learn where it came from, where the influences came from. And so I think I learned that really early on. It's like you have to learn to be really open and don't play one style of music. And I think a lot of guys get really comfortable playing one style of music, and they develop their technique to play that one style of music, and they don't work on, like jazz. I started playing kind of like to the radio pop stuff. And then I started studying and learning how to read and like playing swing and, independent stuff. And it really improved my touch and my facility and understanding of what you can actually do on the drums. And that just led to my versatility, like my open mind and like listening to all kinds of really good music. And then starting to get called for all kinds of different things that, I never imagined I'd get called for. But I got this gig with Ruperts back in like the mid 80s. That was like all across the board variety, from big band to Latin, pop, like hard pop, like really produced pop, to like rock and roll, funk, country. I mean, the whole thing. Even did polkas. I mean, luckily I grew up in New Prague, so I knew a lot about But anyway, I mean, all these, who I would have never imagined by practicing the stuff that I practiced and being, like getting an audition for the McDonald's All-Star Jazz Ensemble where, having to play like a 5-minute solo, would develop my awareness to like, man, you got to like develop some chops to be able to do this kind of stuff and, be good.
Can you speak a little bit about the McDonald's Jazz Ensemble? Because I didn't even know that existed. Yeah,
well, I'm not sure. I think it existed for maybe 5 years or something.
Okay.
But it was a big band. It was like, 5 trumpets and 4 trombones. And it was kind of like, we did play some swing, but I think it was more like rock funk, funk rock, and some, some ballads, a couple of ballads, not too many, kids with lots of energy, they can't play ballads, but yeah, it was just a great experience. I got, Billy Carruthers, who was a great piano player. He moved to Michigan, I think. Everybody knows Billy, who's in the jazz community, and Bill Chenard, and myself, and we had a great rhythm section. And then like Dean Sorensen, who's a teacher at the University of Minnesota. And oh man, there are all kinds of guys in this band that I've played gigs with.
Where would you play?
Well, they just set up these dates like at like the 4th of July function, or these like town squares. I mean, just all over the place. We did like probably a dozen dates throughout the summer. It was just for one summer, but man, I met so many people and played. Kind of got my thing together. I was practicing like 10 hours a day,
Wow.
For that. I mean, I really got into it. So, and I remember talking to Gary when I was studying with him. He said, man, there are guys hanging out off the trees in LA that can play circles around you. He just put it bluntly. It's like, you going to do it or aren't you going to do it? And so, I mean, he told me that like when I was 16 years old. And it's like either, and there are, I mean, you just go on YouTube now these days and you got 8-year-olds that are just, I mean, it's like, wow.
Right.
So I guess I knew what I was fortunate to know that I knew what I wanted to do early on. And I think that was a real advantage to get my head in the game early on. And I think that really, was a good selling point personally when people started calling me and, they could tell I was not a newbie to, doing what they needed to have done. So.
Well, right. And also to jump a little bit forward, you also recorded at Paisley Park. How many times have you recorded at Paisley?
You know what? I think it was just a couple of dates. There's fluky things. People would come into town and it's like they'd need a drummer. And so I think I told you on this little questionnaire you sent out. his group came down from Canada, and David Z, who is, a Prince guy, he was working over at Paisley as, I think, a producer, and I think he was engineering this date anyway. So he had this band come down and was looking for a drummer, and I think I was working at Ruperts at the time. And so I got the call to do this date, and I think we did this one tune, and these kids were like in a contest, so they took it back up to Canada, and it went to #1 in Canada.
Wow. You get any money for that?
No. Well, I mean, I got paid for the date, probably like $300 or something, and and that was it. So just, I mean, how many times has that happened,
Right.
in the music world? So, but
what studio did you record in?
I think it was in B.
B. Okay.
Yep.
Did you ever record in Studio A?
I don't think I did. I think that was pretty Prince land, I think.
Right. Well, I got to go through it a couple times, and
Cool.
I used to sometimes bring artists through there.
Yep.
But I always heard about the drum chamber that was a marble room that you could remove panels to adjust
right.
the tonality. Do you know anything about that, the drum chamber?
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, you'd have to talk to like somebody that's been there, but I mean, I know like Led Zeppelin over in wherever they recorded all those records, man. I've heard of them doing sessions where they had studios where you could move the walls and different surfaces and change, get different reflection stuff. So yeah, it's kind of cool, to know they can do that, and it does change the sound of the drums. Amazing.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
What do you think is one of the coolest gigs you ever had as a session player?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I'm sorry, I can't tell you. I've done like ads for TV,
Okay.
radio. I've been on TV a few times, where maybe I did an acting thing where I played the session and just played along with myself. I can't tell you. I know the one date that I made the most money on, though.
Okay.
It was a Depends undergarment commercial.
Oh, really?
I made a nice taste on that. It was rerun like I think about 7 or 8 times. It was like in different cycles throughout the United States, and you can laugh at it, but I was smiling all the way to the bank on that one.
Well, I'm sure. So can you explain that a little bit? I've heard about this, that artists will get residuals now for every time a commercial is played. Can you talk to that a little bit? Well,
I mean, you do the date, you go in and do the date, get paid for the date. But then if it has to be through the union. These mostly are union things.
Okay.
So when they run a cycle, I think it's like 13 weeks. And so they'll use the thing for 13 weeks. And if it gets reused, or bought again let's say that ran in one market, let's say in Minnesota or the upper Midwest.
Okay.
Well, maybe it got picked up out in LA, so that's like 2 markets now that you're, I mean, this is how like people make a lot of money in the recording business.
Wow.
Because I'm not sure if this really happens anymore. I mean, I think unless you're like a singer, I know singers do really well, or writers, that are doing reuse and that kind of stuff. So, but it was kind of fun. I did a lot of dates back, this was years ago, man. It's changed so much now. Nobody has to go to a recording session anymore.
Right.
They can do it in their basement and just fly tracks around. So, which I just did. It's so odd to not be playing with a rhythm section. It's kind of sad actually, because I like people.
Well, yeah. Well, the part that I don't like about the modern music, and I think why people are becoming disenfranchised with music is, you can send the tracks around, but they turn them into MIDI signals and they trigger other sounds.
Oh, right.
So there you've lost, the artist's feel.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, I was just talking to somebody about this, I don't know, probably about 6 months ago. It's like you can have a really mediocre sound and it actually doesn't matter because they're just going to drop it in, sample it and then mash it around and do whatever they want. So it's just what it is. You would just take it or leave it,
Right. I've talked to a lot of,
Go ahead.
I've talked to a lot of engineers about it, some bigger name engineers as well. And that's all to reduce cost. That's why it's become a norm. And it does greatly reduce, because my buddy just told me about this the other day. He's a fantastic player.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always wanted to hear him play on a recording, right? To see how he's captured, and you can capture all his nuances and such. And he was so excited about his drum sound, but everything was sampled.
Oh,
and so, it sounded good, but it didn't have that, that intangible,
Yep.
I think that's what's really adding to killing the industry. And the second argument to that will be the click track, because I think you should use the click as a guide at best,
right?
But that's it.
Yep.
And sessions that I've had to do, I've had to play right on the click, and there's no feel,
Yep.
or you play so tight, you can actually have an engineer go in there and modify your beats.
Oh, I know. They can see the waveform, man. They can move you around, And I was just talking to somebody the other week about a session. They were engineering out in LA at, I think it was, Capitol Studios or something. And Vinny was on it. And
Kaluta?
Vinny. And he said, man, you wouldn't have believed it. But he said, we had to move them around a little bit. It was just like, for what we needed, we had to move a few things. It was like, exactly the same thing. It's like, really? Vinny? It's like, wow. But, what happens to everybody? Like back in the 80s, when all this, recording stuff was happening and sessions and everybody's playing on all kinds of stuff. And, I've heard guitar players talk about how they go in and, they play and leave and they'd hear the thing like a month later or something, or whenever it came out. It's like, hey man, that's not me. It's like, yeah, you've been replaced. It's like, it happened all the time. And it's just the way it is. Yeah. It's like, you probably still got paid for it, but it's not you, so.
No,
it's kind of a wild deal. You have to have some kind of a thick skin, it's like, it's what it is. It's not that they didn't like you. It's just not what they wanted.
Right.
So.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you about some of your influences. So you cited Steve Gadd, Russ Kunkel, and Jeff Porcaro as three prime inspirations. Can you talk about each drummer and how they inspired you specifically?
Oh man, I think I was really lucky. Like I said before, growing up in the mid 70s, because for me, like a billion other drummers, Steve Gadd, he had just recorded Asia, and to hear that on the radio, they played that on the radio. So, you would never get that track on the radio, I don't think, today, because it's too much music. But, just to be able to hear the sonic, inspiration that he went through his head, and just the parts that he came up with, and now you hear about the stories about it, how he went in and did it in one take, and it's like, that's superhuman. But I always really loved his touch and his time and his musicality and his ability to just kind of fall in to a tune and really, lift it up, elevate it. I don't know, Russ Kunkel, he was just, just like a meat and potatoes kind of guy to me, man. He just had great time. Just great time, great parts. Not that he had great sounding drums or anything, but his I mean, it was undeniable what he did and all the artists that the songs that he played on. Jeff Beccaro, well, that's just like unbelievable. Again, just how, I mean, the kind of tenacity to be able to play the parts that he played and the touch, and to be aware of just the whole entire picture. It's just like, I was really lucky to be able to be influenced by those three guys. And then, later on, I mean, like Max Roach, for instance, or Mel Lewis. I mean, just to hear these guys to play so musically and to play just beautiful, floating time. I mean, just to play quarter notes and to make it sound like it's self-propelled is a talent in itself. Just amazing. But I've been influenced by lots of different drummers, and not all rock drummers, jazz, folk, Zeppelin, it's really hard to nail down any one drummer. And I'm kind of glad that I didn't just listen to one style of music. It was just really, I don't know, just really fortunate.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah. And it's fun. Even I remember, when I was playing a lot, and you get to go out, maybe on a night off or something, and hear somebody, and just around town, and just to hear people it was kind of nice to watch somebody else work, because it's just really fun. But just to hear a different take, and hear the mix, and just kind of see how their approach. It's neat I think that's really interesting to see somebody else's approach to a tune.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I have one, everybody has a different approach, and it was just a neat way of being open to music, I guess. So
one thing I was going to ask you now that COVID is kind of going on, it's not really applicable at the moment, but what do you think is one of the better clubs to play in town? At least, or actually from an audience member to watch a band in town?
Oh man. Well, I mean, when I think, the ones that I worked in, Fine Line, First Avenue, this club that I worked at, Ruperts nightclub, man, that was it was a beautiful club. There was mahogany all over the place. Do you remember it?
Oh yeah. In fact, I went there one time to see you, and they weren't going to let me in because I didn't have a tie. So you ran and got me a tie.
I did?
Yeah, and I had. No, you got one from somebody or something.
Oh
but that's the only way I got in, and I felt like such a fool because I didn't know that there's a dress code.
Oh wow! I didn't even know that. I mean,
well, I think I looked pretty scummy, dude. I was in metal bands and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, well, I just man, I wouldn't even go out in the club. I'd just go in the baker's room and go and practice single stroke rolls and stuff, until the next. I was literally playing 6 hours a night. I would get off the stage, and then I'd go and practice on, just working on my hands and stuff. Then I'd go and play. I mean, I was constantly playing. That was kind of weird. But no. I mean, I knew if I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew what I had to do to get it done. So that's why I practice so much.
Have you ever played the Dakota?
Yeah, a few times. Yep.
My question there specifically is, how's it for stage sound? Because I've never played there, but it's so wide open, and you have your one wall behind you.
Mm-hmm.
what's it like to be able to actually hear the band play?
You know, I've worked. Well, what I can remember is I think there's a curtain running all the way in the back, behind the back.
Okay.
Right?
I think so. I think there's a brick wall that shows too. I haven't been there in a while.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember.
Okay.
Well, I just remember it being really dead sounding. Okay. I mean, there's like the wood floor, but it was really dead sounding and unforgiving. And in jazz, I mean, I think it's really hard to play on a really dead stage because everything gets sucked up, you know, and it's like this room is not giving you anything back, you know, and I think maybe once they turn the PA on and you get some, you know, ambience going on, it might help a little bit. But I remember it being somewhat difficult to play in that room, you know. Okay. So, yeah, that's all I got on that one.
No worries. Better than me. I've never played there, so
yeah.
I'm lucky if I have a monitor. So
yeah.
Well, great. Well, you know, not that I want to wrap it up, but we've been talking a little bit over an hour, and it's been such a fantastic time catching up with you and getting more in depth about a little bit about your history and your ideas about drumming and drum craftsmanship, which I totally admire.
Oh, thanks.
So 2 questions I was going to ask, or a few more. Specifically, how much of your life right now is actually drumming and recording and being a session player?
Very little. I mean, since the COVID thing came, I mean, I can count on 2 hands the number of dates I've had in 6 months. I mean, it's just like gone away. So, I mean, Boom Alley Drums has saved my butt, and I'm, you know, thankful that people trust me with their drums. And, but you know, like, I've had like a couple of major recording things, you know, just like for, you know, live project for a live stream or whatever. But, you know, it just kind of comes and goes, and there's no consistency. You know, you have to be a little nuts to be in this business, you know, because I mean, you have to have the mentality to like, just like have faith, you know, that things, you know, and things have been pretty good, you know. It hasn't been a great year, but it's not, you know, terrible. So
prior to COVID, do you still do a lot of session work?
No, it's just so changed. I mean, when I was younger in my 20s, you know, and you're like kind of the hot thing, you know, it's like people call you. And then after a while you get a little older and, you know, you just, I don't know, you like to like walk your dog and like kind of be at home a little bit and stuff. And it's like you're less excitable. I mean, I'm more wise about like my fee, you know, what needs to happen. And, you know, it's just like I remember a drummer here in town said he doesn't pick up his trap case for less than $150 a date. It's like, well, amen, brother, because, you know, medical bills are expensive. So, but you know, recording, it's not that you fall out of favor. It's just like there are a lot of guys. When I taught at McNally, I bet I taught all the guys that were doing all the sessions in town, every one of them. It was like, well, I guess I must have done something right.
And shot yourself in the foot at the same time.
Yeah, right. But, you know, that wasn't my intent. You know, it's just like, I'm glad they were successful at that. So, you know.
Exactly. So
it's just cool, you know, and I get occasional calls here and there, but it's not something that you know, I used to wait around, man, you know, try to stay busy. It's like, oh, they're going to call. It's like, well, it just doesn't work that way. So, go ahead.
Well, one question I was going to ask is also with McNally Smith. How did you get that teaching position?
It was right after Ruperts had closed. I think this is 92.
Okay.
Maybe a few years down the road. And, I'd done work for Gordy Knudsen, drum work and all. I mean, I've worked for everybody. But Gordy and he lived down the street. I was in South Minneapolis, and he was right by Lake Calhoun, lived down there. And he'd call me over and try to get me to do stuff on the drums and whatever. And, he was always very cunning that way. But he knew about me. And I remember one time he had played a Steve Miller concert at, I think it was the Lake Harriet Band Shell. And they recorded it. It was on the radio. And, I was somewhat in awe of Gordy at that time because, he was a great player.
Oh, yeah.
He still is a great player. But I transcribed his solo that he played on the live thing. And I don't know how, I must have told him. He said, "Man, I got to see that." So I took it over to his place. It's like, he couldn't believe it. I wrote it like in these big sheets of paper so he could actually read it. And I think he was really dumbfounded. I mean, flattered that somebody would take the time to write out a solo. But, and I always thought it was kind of cool, But, and then, I was just working away, and then all of a sudden I get this call. It's like, "Hey, man, what do you do?" And it's like, well, I'm trying to stay busy right now because my main gig had gone down. And, when you're tied up for basically 10 years, 5 to 6 nights a week, people forget about you, It's just like kind of the way it is. And he said, "Well, I got a teaching position that I could really use somebody." And he said, "What you have to do is you got to go and do a interview and stuff and see if they'll hire you." And it wasn't much of an interview because I think I was kind of a shoo-in. So anyway, so I started teaching there, like I think in 96 or 5 or something like that. And, I just started doing some lessons, and then I started doing some classes, and, I was never there full time, which was fine because they had guys doing, the full time thing, and there were only so many hours to be had. So, but Stanek and Stever and later on Schmallenberger and Gordy were there, and so it was fine. Gordy was always really nice to me. He always made things work, and just a super intelligent guy. I learned tons from that dude.
That's awesome.
I hope that answered your question.
Oh, of course. I just like to. I just sometimes just sit there because I like to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
Then maybe you'll eventually get to the dirt, and then we can get something going on.
Oh no, life's too short for that, man.
Yeah. No. Then one more question before we get going is you got Boom Alley Drums still going. You're going to go on a slight hiatus, but are you still doing at least drum crafts work for people?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, like this year, I've had like this guy. He's actually a bass player of the Minnesota Orchestra. He bought a DW kit out in LA that was great drummer. I can't remember his name.
Okay.
Well, anyway, he bought it. And the floor tom, I mean, they dropped the box and broke the shell. I mean, it was this gorgeous drum set. Anyway, so I do that kind of work. I'm building like this set I told you about an hour ago for this guy. So that will be coming in. I'm always developing products for drums or improving them. John Haga, who works over at Bud's Music in Hopkins. He just gave me, I just rewrapped his DW drums after 25 years. So, I mean, I get all kinds of different work. This one guy bought a set of, he actually found a Boom Alley set somewhere. Eric Shea is his name. He knows me well because he's given me a lot of work. But anyway, he wanted a nesting set. So I created a nesting set out of these drums, and he loves them. So I mean, I just all kinds of bearing edge work. I mean, lugs break, replacing parts, that kind of stuff. So,
well, how can people reach out to you if they want to have some work done?
Well, if you need to call me, you can reach me at 612-242-5687, or you can go to Facebook and become my friend, or you can go to my webpage, and there's a phone number there with some information. You can also just email me at dave@boomalley.com. So it's boom as an explosion, ALLEY drums.com.
Where did you come up with the name Boom Alley?
We're living in Golden Valley for 16 years, and our house abutted an abandoned alleyway. And so I knew my drums went boom, as that's what I kind of sound I wanted to get out of them. And then alley and drums, obviously, and it's not real scientific, but it seemed to work. So
it works.
People remember the name, so it's kind of fun.
And are you accepting any students at the moment?
Yeah, I'm always get together with guys that want to learn about reading or different technique things. I've straightened a lot of guys out over the years, and I still get like notes from guys saying, "Man, I still remember when you worked with me on this thing, and God, I was so messed up." And just sitting down with you and it turned my whole thing around. So that's really nice. I test that to Gary Gauger because he was a stickler on technique, man. Okay. He would just wouldn't let anything get away, and so I learned really like German grip, matched, but kind of flat. And I didn't really learn traditional grip until I started playing brushes. And then I don't know, playing brushes, like I'll play like a country thing, matched grip. That just feels more comfortable. But if I'm going to play like jazz or something, a swing thing, I'll play traditional. It just, that feels, and I think, I encourage guys to, you got to find out what works for you. Don't do what somebody else does, because it's, they're not you. You have to do your own thing. It took me years to figure that out. You just got to let go and just like what feels right. It's just don't hurt yourself in the process. So, but yeah, just call me at my number 612-242-5687. And we'll set up a time and get together. Usually I do an hour. So.
Okay, well, yeah. I have all that information in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
Please feel free to contact him. He's a great teacher, great drum builder, inspiration to me for many years. So thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
And just before we get going, is there anything else you'd like to let us know about, or?
Boy, I think I've talked enough.
Okay. Well,
thanks so much for having me, Paul. It's been a delight to be here and, just answer all these things that I don't really think about. So,
well, thank you so much. You take care, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Okay, you too. Good night now.
Night.
Minnesota Drummers expanding drumming news. We are proud to announce the addition of Drumming News Network. There have been many requests to feature global drumming information, artists, and product releases on Minnesota Drummer. Minnesota Drummers' vision is to stay focused exclusively on Minnesota drummers and the Minnesota drumming community. Please visit our new website, drummingnewsnetwork.com, and please be sure to like us on Facebook. Thank you so much for your continued interest and support. Opening beats provided by Alec Tackman. You too can own this fantastic multi-volume library of live drum loops and samples. Whether you're a drummer looking for new ideas or you know a songwriter looking for a drum loop library, this is the library you're looking for. Support a local musician and drummer. Go to Alec Tackman's website. That is www.alectackman.com. Spelled ALECTACKMANN. Are you looking for a drum instructor that will help you find your own musical voice? Whether you're a beginner, advanced, or in between, the David Stanek School of Drumming offers an experienced and professional approach to help you take control of your drumming. David served on the faculty of McNally Smith College of Music for 27 years. Currently, he serves on the Percussive Art Society Drum Set Committee and is a member of the Modern Drummer, Remo, and Vic Firth education teams. David has authored multiple books including Mastering the Tables of Time. It was voted the #1 education book in the Modern Drummer 2009 Readers Poll. Let David help you find your beat. Please visit www.davidstanekschoolofdrumming.com. David Stanek is spelled DAVIDSTANOCH, schoolofdrumming.com. Again, the David Stanek School of Drumming. You've been listening to Minnesota Drummer. Minnesota Drummer is copyright 2020, all rights reserved. Any content played or viewed during this broadcast is used with permission, is copyright of the respective owners, and is used for promotional purposes only. No part of this broadcast can be edited, reproduced, and cannot be sold. Please look us up and follow us on our various social media sites. You can follow us at minnesotadrummer.com. There you'll find our contact forum where you can give us feedback and recommend a drummer. Thank you for listening.